She had always been underestimated. In the small village where she was born, people whispered behind her back, mocking her quiet ways and simple appearance. She wasn't flashy, she didn't dress in bright colors, and she rarely spoke unless spoken to, but there was something in her eyes, a depth, a focus, that most people ignored. Her name was Layla, and to the townsfolk she was just another simple woman who spent her days tending to chores, gathering water, and walking through the dusty lanes with a basket of vegetables. But there was one thing about Layla that nobody ever knew: she had an uncanny skill with firearms. It was not taught to her in formal training. It came from her father, a retired marksman who had once served in the army. From a young age she had been fascinated with his stories of precision, patience, and the sharp focus required to hit targets that seemed impossible. Her father, recognizing her innate talent, had secretly trained her in the art of marksmanship. He showed her how to steady her hands, how to align her breathing with the rhythm of her heart, and how to see the trajectory of a bullet before it even left the barrel. These lessons, whispered under the moonlight and practiced in the privacy of their small backyard, became the foundation of a skill that would one day surprise the world. The day she arrived at the shooting range, she had no expectations beyond quietly observing. It was a rare opportunity for villagers like her to watch the army conduct demonstrations of skill and strength, and she had come out of curiosity more than ambition. The range was filled with seasoned soldiers, officers, and high-ranking officials, their polished uniforms gleaming under the harsh sunlight. Among them, 3 generals were demonstrating advanced combat maneuvers, showing off their precision and commanding presence. When she walked past the assembled crowd, heads turned, not in admiration but in mild ridicule. Whispers followed her every step. "What is she doing here? She doesn't belong. Just watch her fail." The laughter was quiet at first, almost polite, but it grew sharper as they noticed her modest clothing, her hesitant movements, and the simple way she carried herself. Layla felt the sting of mockery, but she did not flinch. She had grown used to it. The villagers had mocked her, the shopkeepers had mocked her, and even her peers had whispered cruel things about her appearance and abilities. Mockery was nothing new, and she had learned early on that the best way to respond was not with words, but with action. She stepped forward to the designated firing line, where the instructors handed her a rifle and explained the targets. The generals, noticing her presence, exchanged amused glances, clearly expecting a performance so poor it would provide endless entertainment for their peers. Layla's pulse quickened, not with fear but with determination. She steadied her breath, centered her focus, and recalled every lesson her father had taught her. Every muscle, every tiny adjustment, every flick of the finger on the trigger mattered. Her heart beat in sync with the rhythm of concentration, and she knew she had but one shot to prove herself. As the whistle blew and the first round was called, Layla raised the rifle with a calm that belied her nerves. The generals, standing nearby, leaned in, ready to mock her first misstep. But Layla was not merely aiming at the obvious target. She had scanned the surroundings, assessed the range, and identified a series of targets that, if struck in sequence, would demonstrate skill beyond anyone's expectation. She exhaled slowly, lined up the first shot, and squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit its mark perfectly, splitting the center of the target in a way that caused the crowd to murmur in disbelief. Emboldened, she adjusted her aim for the next shot. The generals smirked, thinking it a fluke, but then the second bullet found its target with equal precision. The crowd was now silent, watching with growing tension and fascination. Layla's hands remained steady, her focus unwavering. She aimed at the third target, the most difficult of all, positioned at an angle that would challenge even the most experienced shooters. As she pulled the trigger, time seemed to slow. The bullet flew, slicing through the air, and struck with flawless accuracy. A stunned hush fell over the range. The generals, who had been so confident moments ago, now stared in shock. The mockery that had filled the air just minutes before was replaced with disbelief, admiration, and, most importantly, respect. Layla lowered her rifle, her face calm, her eyes bright with quiet triumph. What followed was not just a demonstration of skill, but a revelation of character. The simplicity that everyone had derided, the quiet demeanor, the unassuming appearance, was not weakness but a mask that concealed extraordinary talent. The generals, who had never expected to be outmatched by someone they considered ordinary, found themselves re-evaluating every assumption they had made. Layla had not only proven her marksmanship but had shattered the prejudices of everyone present. The soldiers whispered among themselves, the officers exchanged uneasy glances, and even the audience that had come to see entertainment instead witnessed a lesson in humility and the danger of underestimating anyone. Layla did not boast, did not gloat. She simply collected her rifle, gave a polite nod to the instructors, and walked away with the same quiet dignity she had carried all her life. But the memory of that day, the day the simple woman outshot 3 generals, would linger in the minds of those who witnessed it for years to come. The aftermath of Layla's demonstration was electric. The murmurs and whispers that had once mocked her now carried a new tone, one of astonishment and disbelief. Soldiers, officers, and even onlookers could hardly believe what they had just witnessed. The 3 generals, whose reputations for precision and control were unmatched, stood frozen. Their expressions were a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and grudging respect. For the first time, they were confronted with the undeniable truth: talent could not be measured by appearance or social standing. Layla, the simple woman from the village who had been dismissed and underestimated, had challenged their expertise and won, not through arrogance, but through calm focus and skill honed in quiet practice. The generals exchanged glances, their pride wounded but their respect silently growing. One of them, a man known for his stern demeanor and harsh expectations, stepped forward, a rare flicker of admiration in his eyes. He did not speak immediately, but the tension in the air was thick, as though everyone was waiting for a verdict, an acknowledgement of what had just happened. Layla, sensing the eyes on her, did not look nervous or flustered. She simply adjusted her grip on the rifle she had returned to its stand, her movements graceful and deliberate, as though every action, even now, carried a lesson in patience and control. The generals, realizing that mere words could not suffice, decided to approach her formally. They were trained to handle threats, to command respect, and to maintain authority, yet this situation challenged all of their assumptions. They were not used to being outclassed by someone who seemed so unremarkable. One of them, the oldest and most experienced, spoke first. "You have a remarkable skill," he said, his voice measured but tinged with genuine surprise. "It is rare to see such precision from someone who has not undergone formal military training. Where did you learn to shoot like this?" Layla met his gaze calmly, her expression composed. She chose her words carefully, aware that her answer would determine how much they truly understood her. "My father trained me," she replied simply. "He taught me patience, focus, and how to respect the weapon. That is all." There was no boast, no attempt to elevate herself above them. Yet her words carried a weight that none of the generals could ignore. They were not expecting humility, let alone honesty, from someone who had just outshone them on the field. The generals, still processing the demonstration, began to reconsider the assumptions they had made about skill, strength, and capability. They had judged her by appearance, by the simplicity of her demeanor, and by the ease with which she had been dismissed. In that instant, all those assumptions were proven false. One general, the youngest of the 3, shook his head slowly as if trying to make sense of what had happened. "I have never seen anyone handle a rifle with such instinctive precision," he admitted. "Not in training camps, not in exercises. You have a natural gift that defies conventional measurement." His words, though hesitant, carried profound respect. Layla nodded, acknowledging their recognition without arrogance. She understood that true skill often earned its recognition silently, through action rather than words. And this was exactly what had happened. The crowd, which had been silent for several tense moments, began to murmur in admiration. Soldiers whispered among themselves, realizing that underestimating someone based on looks, gender, or social background was not only foolish but potentially dangerous. Officers who had attended countless drills and exercises began to question the rigidity of their own judgments. The event, initially intended as a routine demonstration, had transformed into a profound lesson in humility, perception, and the power of skill nurtured quietly over time. Layla, meanwhile, remained composed, aware that the reactions around her, though flattering, were secondary to her own internal sense of accomplishment. Her satisfaction came not from the astonishment of others, but from the knowledge that she had executed her skill perfectly, without error, under pressure, and in the face of doubt. The generals, after a brief discussion among themselves, realized that Layla's abilities could not be ignored. They decided to invite her to participate in more advanced training exercises, not just as a demonstration, but as a contributor to strategic evaluation. It was an unusual step, one that broke traditional military protocol, but her performance had left no alternative. They approached her formally, this time with a proposal. "We would like you to train with us," one general said. "Not as a novice observer, but as a marksman whose skill could enhance our operations." Layla listened carefully. The opportunity was unprecedented, offering exposure to techniques, strategies, and experience that few civilians had ever accessed. Yet it also came with risk and scrutiny. Accepting meant stepping into a world of discipline and expectation far beyond the village life she had known. After a moment of thought, she nodded. "I will do it," she said. Her decision was calm, decisive, and measured. She understood that skill was only one component. Learning, adapting, and surviving in a structured environment would be the true test. That evening, as the range emptied and the sun dipped behind the hills, Layla walked home slowly, reflecting on the day's events. The villagers, unaware of the full story, had no idea that their quiet, simple neighbor had shattered assumptions and impressed generals. Layla's mind, however, was focused on the path ahead. She knew that her skills, while formidable, were only the beginning. The world beyond her village demanded more than accuracy. It demanded resilience, courage, and the ability to navigate challenges far greater than the targets she had faced today. She felt a mixture of excitement and anticipation, a quiet thrill that came from knowing she had proven herself once, and that the journey to proving herself again was only beginning. The next morning, Layla arrived at the military compound, a sprawling network of buildings, firing ranges, and training fields that seemed vast and intimidating compared to the quiet simplicity of her village. The generals who had witnessed her skill the previous day were already there, waiting to formally introduce her to the program. Soldiers in crisp uniforms moved with purpose, their boots striking the ground in rhythmic precision. Layla felt a flicker of unease, a rare sensation for someone so disciplined, but she quickly pushed it aside. She reminded herself that her father had prepared her for moments like this, not just for the act of shooting, but for facing new environments with composure and focus. The generals welcomed her with formal nods, acknowledging her presence not as a visitor, but as an individual who belonged in their midst. For the first time, Layla saw the enormity of what lay ahead. She was not merely participating in a demonstration. She was entering a world where every decision, every movement, and every action would be scrutinized, measured, and tested. It was a realm of precision and discipline, where mistakes were costly and victories were hard-earned. Her first day of training began with the fundamentals, surprisingly thorough despite her proven marksmanship. She was introduced to advanced firearms, different calibers, and the mechanics of weapons she had never encountered before. While some of the soldiers sneered at her presence initially, thinking her village background made her ill-prepared, they quickly learned that Layla's skill translated seamlessly to the new challenges. The generals themselves observed quietly from a distance, studying her movements with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Even the instructors, seasoned veterans with years of experience, were caught off guard by the speed with which she adapted. Layla listened attentively to every explanation, absorbed every demonstration, and practiced tirelessly. She understood that proficiency was not enough. Mastery required repetition, patience, and the willingness to push beyond perceived limits. By midday, her accuracy had surpassed many of the soldiers who had spent months, even years, in formal training. Physical training was a different kind of test. Layla was not accustomed to the intense regimen that military life demanded, but she faced it with determination. The mornings began with grueling runs across uneven terrain, carrying equipment that weighed far more than her small frame suggested she could manage. Soldiers who had mocked her before were now astonished at her stamina, which, while not remarkable in raw power, was remarkable in perseverance. Every stride, every obstacle she overcame, became a testament to her resolve. Even when her muscles ached and her lungs burned, she pressed forward, remembering the discipline her father had instilled in her. The generals took note of her resilience, seeing in her a combination of skill, patience, and endurance that few could rival. It was a subtle yet powerful lesson. Strength was not merely physical, it was the ability to endure, adapt, and rise above expectation. By afternoon, she was led to the tactical exercises, simulations designed to test both intelligence and reaction under pressure. These drills forced soldiers to think quickly, make precise decisions, and coordinate with teammates in high-stress scenarios. Layla initially felt out of her depth. She had trained with rifles, but these exercises demanded more than aim. They required strategy, anticipation, and improvisation. Yet she quickly discovered that her focus, honed through years of solitary practice, gave her a unique advantage. While others reacted hastily, she observed carefully, calculated the best course of action, and executed flawlessly. Her teammates, once skeptical, began to rely on her guidance, impressed by her clarity and efficiency under pressure. The generals, watching from the observation tower, exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Layla was no ordinary recruit. She was a force that could shift the balance of any operation, not through brute strength, but through calm intelligence, precision, and intuition. As days turned into weeks, Layla's presence in the compound became more than accepted, it became respected. Soldiers who had mocked her initially now sought her advice, learning from her techniques, her breathing methods, and her approach to targeting. Her quiet demeanor, once seen as a weakness, was recognized as a strength. She never rushed, never panicked, and never allowed pride to cloud judgment. Instructors marveled at her ability to remain composed under pressure, a trait that many seasoned officers struggled to master. Even the generals, previously proud and unflappable, found themselves occasionally humbled by her insight. Layla's influence extended beyond her marksmanship. It became a demonstration of leadership through example. Yet not all challenges were met with success. Layla faced moments of doubt and fatigue, where the weight of expectation pressed down on her shoulders. She struggled with complex simulations, misjudged distances in unfamiliar terrains, and occasionally faltered under the scrutiny of instructors. But each mistake became a lesson, each setback a stepping stone. She reminded herself constantly, victory was not defined by perfection, but by persistence and growth. The generals, witnessing her evolution, understood that her value lay not only in her natural talent but in her capacity to adapt, learn, and persevere. This combination of skill and humility was rare, and it marked Layla as someone who could redefine expectations. By the end of her first month, Layla had transformed from the simple village woman who had once walked quietly among onlookers into a figure of remarkable capability and presence. Her marksmanship remained impeccable, her endurance had grown, and her tactical thinking was sharp and reliable. More importantly, she had earned respect, not by demanding it, but by demonstrating her worth in ways that could not be ignored. The generals, now genuinely invested in her progress, began discussing how to involve her in more critical exercises, envisioning missions that required both precision and strategy. For Layla, the journey had only just begun. She had proven herself once, but the challenges ahead were far greater than any target on a range. Her skill had opened the door, but walking through it meant embracing danger, responsibility, and the unknown with the same calm determination that had guided her hand from the very beginning. Weeks of intensive training had transformed Layla into a soldier of remarkable capability, but nothing could prepare her for the reality of a real mission. The generals, impressed by her progress, had decided it was time to test her in the field. She was briefed early one morning, the briefing room filled with maps, photographs, and tactical plans. The mission was clear: a reconnaissance operation deep within hostile territory, where intelligence and precision were paramount. The terrain was rough, the enemy unpredictable, and the risks high. For the first time, Layla felt a flutter of tension that went beyond the usual stress of training exercises. This was real. Every decision she made, every step she took could mean the difference between success and failure, life and death. Yet, beneath the nerves, a steady calm took hold. She reminded herself of her father's lessons: focus, patience, and trust in one's own skill. Today, those principles would guide her more than ever. Layla was paired with a small team of seasoned soldiers, all of whom had years of experience in the field. Initially, there was skepticism. Some of them questioned whether a woman from a quiet village could withstand the rigors of combat. But as they moved out into the rugged landscape, it became apparent that Layla's discipline, endurance, and keen observation were unmatched. She navigated difficult terrain with ease, her eyes scanning for movement, listening for subtle shifts in the environment, and reading signs invisible to others. The soldiers began to rely on her instincts, noting her precise judgments in situations that could have otherwise led to errors. For the first time, she realized that her training was not just about shooting or endurance. It was about understanding the battlefield, predicting outcomes, and making decisions with clarity under immense pressure. The team reached a vantage point overlooking the enemy's encampment. From this distance, it was difficult to gather actionable intelligence, and one wrong move could expose them to detection. Layla crouched behind a boulder, her rifle ready, her mind scanning every inch of the area. She observed the enemy soldiers' movements, noting patterns, routines, and potential weaknesses. Unlike many who relied solely on equipment or brute force, Layla trusted her observation skills. She directed her teammates to focus on critical areas, sharing insights with precision and authority. Her calm, measured voice cut through the tension, and slowly, the soldiers began to see her not as a novice but as a leader in strategy and observation. Every suggestion she made was backed by careful reasoning, every instruction executed flawlessly. Suddenly, the enemy noticed a shift, a soldier straying from routine, and tension spiked. The team froze, aware that exposure could compromise the mission entirely. Layla, however, remained composed. She took a deep breath, calculated trajectories and identified the safest path forward. Moving with silent efficiency, she led the team through cover, navigating unseen routes and avoiding patrols. Her every movement was deliberate, her knowledge of terrain guiding their progress. For the soldiers, this was astonishing. They had trained for years to anticipate such dangers, yet here was Layla, without the same formal battlefield experience, outmaneuvering potential threats with uncanny precision. By the time they reached a secure observation point, the mission was already halfway accomplished, and morale had shifted entirely. The team looked at her not with doubt but with admiration and trust. Hours passed as they gathered intelligence. Layla's sharp eyes and steady hand allowed the team to document enemy positions, strategies, and equipment with remarkable efficiency. She recorded details others might have missed, from subtle guard rotations to structural weaknesses, creating a clear, actionable report. When the team finally began to withdraw, the real test came: navigating back through hostile territory without detection. This phase demanded silence, patience, and impeccable timing. One wrong step could result in catastrophic failure. Layla's training and instincts converged perfectly. She guided the team using natural cover, minimal movement, and subtle signals. Every step was calculated, every decision precise. Even the most skeptical soldiers followed her lead without hesitation, understanding that her judgment was the key to survival. As dusk fell, they returned to base safely, the mission a complete success. The generals received the intelligence with astonishment and satisfaction. For Layla, however, the victory was quieter. It was not the recognition that thrilled her, but the knowledge that she had applied everything she had learned under real-world conditions. She had transformed skill into action, precision into strategy, and calm into leadership. The team that had doubted her presence now looked to her for guidance, understanding that her abilities were not only rare but essential. Even the generals, who had once regarded her as an unlikely prodigy, could not ignore the results. Her performance had exceeded expectations, proving that talent, discipline, and focus could overcome assumptions and prejudice. That night, alone in her quarters, Layla reflected on the mission. She thought of her father's teachings, the quiet hours spent practicing in the village, and the countless challenges she had overcome since stepping into the compound. Every obstacle, every doubt, every moment of hardship had prepared her for this day. She realized that true mastery was not just about skill, but about applying it under pressure, making choices with courage, and earning the trust of those around you. For the first time, she understood that her journey was far from over. Today had been a victory, yes, but it had also revealed new challenges and higher expectations. And Layla, now more than ever, was ready to face them with the same calm determination that had guided her from the very beginning. After the successful reconnaissance mission, Layla's reputation within the military compound had grown immensely. No longer was she just the village girl who had surprised the generals with a single shot. She had proven herself as a strategist, a leader, and a soldier capable of performing under extreme pressure. Word of her accomplishments spread quickly through the ranks, from the lowest recruits to the generals themselves. Officers who had initially dismissed her began to seek her advice on training, tactics, and marksmanship. Even the most skeptical soldiers acknowledged that Layla's presence brought a level of calm and efficiency that elevated everyone around her. Despite the newfound respect, Layla remained humble, focusing on her work rather than accolades. She knew that her journey was far from over and that the real test lay ahead in missions that demanded even greater skill and courage. The generals called a meeting shortly after the mission to discuss her next assignment. This time, it was not a routine reconnaissance but a high-stakes operation aimed at neutralizing a threat that had been destabilizing the region. Enemy forces had fortified a series of strategic positions, and intelligence suggested that key commanders were coordinating attacks from within these strongholds. Layla was briefed alongside a team of elite operatives, men and women who had years of combat experience. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. This mission was no longer about observing and reporting. It required precision strikes, careful planning, and split-second decision-making that could determine the lives of dozens of soldiers. The generals emphasized the importance of intelligence, stealth, and accuracy, clearly recognizing Layla's unique skills as crucial to the mission's success. Preparation began immediately. Layla spent hours poring over maps, analyzing enemy positions, and rehearsing potential scenarios with her team. She suggested approaches that minimized exposure, identified weak points in enemy defenses, and calculated the most effective angles for engagement. Her teammates, initially hesitant, grew to trust her insights completely. Layla had a remarkable ability to anticipate outcomes, a skill that came not from formal military schooling but from years of quiet observation, patience and practice in her village. The generals watched with interest as the team adjusted their strategy around her suggestions. Layla's presence had transformed not just her own performance but the collective efficiency of the unit. On the morning of the operation, Layla's team moved out under the cover of darkness. The air was tense, the forest around them silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves. Every step was deliberate, every breath controlled. Layla led with calm authority, signaling when to stop, when to move and when to take cover. Her instincts guided the team through a network of paths that avoided detection, her knowledge of terrain proving invaluable. As they approached the enemy stronghold, she noticed subtle movements indicating patrol rotations, hidden traps, and potential vantage points for snipers. Her observations allowed the team to maneuver with precision, avoiding ambushes and staying ahead of the enemy's awareness. When they finally reached the strategic positions, Layla's skill with her rifle became crucial. She was tasked with neutralizing key targets to disrupt enemy coordination. One by one she took calculated shots, each executed with perfect timing. The sound of a single shot echoed in the stillness, and with every strike the enemy's ability to coordinate weakened. Her focus never wavered, she was aware of every angle, every line of sight and every potential threat. The team followed her lead flawlessly, moving in tandem with her actions, guided by her insight and precision. The mission that could have been chaotic under less capable leadership unfolded with disciplined efficiency. Despite the danger, Layla remained composed. Even when an unexpected patrol approached, she quickly adapted, signaling her team to disperse and using shadows and terrain to maintain concealment. Her calm under pressure inspired confidence in her teammates, who responded without hesitation to her guidance. It was a remarkable display of leadership and skill, a fusion of observation, strategy, and marksmanship that few had ever witnessed. By the time they completed their objectives, the enemy positions were neutralized, and the team had avoided unnecessary casualties. The operation was a resounding success. Upon returning to base, Layla was met with applause and recognition, though she quietly deflected praise, insisting that the mission's success was the result of teamwork. The generals, however, were more direct. They acknowledged that her abilities had been instrumental in achieving objectives that many had thought impossible. Her journey from a humble village girl to a respected soldier and strategist was complete in the eyes of the military, yet for Layla, it was merely another step. She understood that with greater skill came greater responsibility, and that the challenges ahead would test her in ways even this mission had not. That evening, as she sat alone reflecting on the day's events, Layla realized the full weight of what she had accomplished. She had not only demonstrated her exceptional skill but had also earned the trust and respect of those who had doubted her. The transformation from a simple woman mocked at a shooting range to a key player in high-stakes operations was profound. She knew that her journey would continue, and that future missions would demand even more courage, precision, and intelligence. But Layla felt ready, strengthened by her experiences, her training, and the unwavering discipline that had guided her from the very beginning. The news of Layla's recent mission had spread far beyond the compound, reaching high-ranking officials and intelligence units across the region. Her precision, calm under pressure, and strategic insight had become the subject of discussion in war rooms and planning sessions. Yet, despite the accolades, Layla knew her most challenging mission was approaching. Intelligence reports had identified a heavily fortified enemy headquarters deep within hostile territory, where 3 high-ranking generals were orchestrating attacks that threatened countless lives. This mission was unprecedented in its risk. Success could shift the balance of power, while failure could result in catastrophic consequences. The generals called a meeting to brief her personally, emphasizing the gravity of the task. Layla listened intently, absorbing every detail, every map, every calculated threat. The responsibility weighed heavily, but she felt a strange calm. This was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life. Preparation for this mission was unlike anything Layla had encountered before. She studied maps with meticulous care, analyzing every approach route, every vantage point, and every potential obstacle. The operation required precision sniping, coordinated movement, and flawless timing. The target was not just enemy soldiers, it was the 3 generals themselves whose removal could cripple enemy operations. Layla worked tirelessly, rehearsing scenarios with her team, simulating enemy reactions, and planning contingencies for every possible outcome. Her experience had taught her that success depended not only on skill but on anticipation, intuition, and unwavering focus. Every team member was trained under her guidance, their trust in her judgment absolute. By the time they were ready to deploy, the mission plan was nearly perfect, a testament to Layla's intelligence and leadership. On the night of the operation, the team moved silently through the dense terrain. The forest was alive with subtle sounds, the distant howl of predators, the rustle of leaves, the faint whisper of wind through the trees. Each step was deliberate, every movement calculated. Layla led the team with precision, signaling when to stop, when to advance, and when to observe. She scanned the terrain with unwavering focus, identifying potential threats, patrol patterns, and hidden obstacles. As they approached the enemy headquarters, the tension increased. Guards moved with disciplined precision, searchlights swept the area intermittently, and the buildings were heavily fortified. But Layla remained composed, relying on her training, instincts, and meticulous preparation to guide the team. The key to the mission was timing. Layla identified a rooftop vantage point that offered a clear line of sight to the enemy general's location. From this position, she could execute precision shots without exposing herself or her team. As the soldiers secured positions around her, Layla's heart rate remained steady, her breathing controlled. She observed the enemy's movements carefully, noting every shift, every gesture, and every potential vulnerability. The first target emerged, a general reviewing maps with aides. Layla took a deep breath, calculated the distance, wind direction, and angle, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was flawless. The second general appeared shortly after, inspecting communications equipment. Once again, Layla's precision was unmatched. With each successful strike, the mission progressed, but the challenge intensified as the third general was protected by multiple guards and moving constantly between structures. For the third target, Layla had to adjust her strategy. She relied on stealth, patience, and timing, moving to a more concealed position while guiding her team to maintain cover. The general moved into a courtyard, surrounded by guards and equipment. Layla focused, calculating her trajectory down to the smallest detail. She waited for the exact moment when the general was fully exposed, aligned her sight, and fired. The shot hit its mark perfectly. Within minutes, all three generals were neutralized, and the enemy command structure was thrown into chaos. The mission was a complete success, executed flawlessly under conditions that would have overwhelmed most seasoned operatives. As the team exfiltrated the area, the reality of their achievement began to sink in. They had completed an operation that few would have considered possible, eliminating a major threat with precision, efficiency, and minimal risk to themselves. Layla's leadership, skill, and unwavering focus had made it possible. The soldiers who had once doubted her now looked to her with unreserved respect, recognizing not only her talent but her ability to inspire and guide under the most intense pressure. For Layla, the victory was more than a personal triumph. It was proof that preparation, discipline, and calm determination could overcome even the most daunting challenges. Back at the compound, the generals and officials praised Layla and her team, acknowledging the extraordinary impact of their mission. Awards, commendations, and recognition followed, but Layla quietly reflected on what had truly mattered: the lives protected, the enemy disrupted, and the knowledge that she had fulfilled her duty with precision and honor. Alone in her quarters that night, she considered the journey that had brought her here, from a young woman mocked at the shooting range to a strategist and marksman capable of changing the course of conflict. She realized that true mastery was not about skill alone. It was about courage, discipline, and the ability to act decisively when it mattered most. Layla had proven herself beyond doubt, yet she understood that her path was ongoing, with challenges yet to come, each demanding the same unwavering focus that had brought her this far. The success of the mission that eliminated the three enemy generals marked a turning point for Layla, both professionally and personally. Her reputation had reached unprecedented heights. She was no longer a rising talent or a skilled recruit. She had become a symbol of precision, courage, and strategic brilliance. The military hierarchy that once doubted her now sought her counsel on operations of the highest importance. Yet with recognition came new challenges. Layla realized that her actions had shifted the balance of power, and the enemy would not remain idle. Rumors circulated of retaliatory strikes, sophisticated countermeasures, and attempts to undermine the compound's intelligence network. Every operation now carried higher stakes, and Layla understood that she had to prepare for situations more complex than any she had faced before. Her mind was constantly alert, analyzing, anticipating, and planning, for she knew that her past victories had painted a target on her back. The generals called her into a private meeting, a rare privilege that underscored the gravity of the situation. They briefed her on the latest intelligence. Enemy forces were regrouping, reinforcing critical positions, and employing deceptive tactics to mislead Allied